The bent over or seated row is one of the best exercises for the back muscles and doesn't need access to a gym to perform it. So let's do a complete breakdown of one of my favorite exercises. Hi everyone, and welcome to Exercise for Health, and welcome back to a series where I break down a particular exercise to provide you with a comprehensive guide on how to perform it with correct technique, as well as point out the common mistakes people make, adaptations that may be required for certain health conditions, and also look at some variations or progressions that you can try once you've mastered the main movement. As this will be a very lengthy video due to the detailed nature of it, I've placed timestamps for the chapters in the description below. So in this episode, we will be analysing the bent over row, which can also be done as a seated row if you don't have access to any free weights. This pulling exercise recruits many of the muscles in the posterior chain, including the latissimus dorsi or lats on the side of the back, which act as the prime mover for the movement, but also the trapezius muscles on the upper back, the posterior deltoid muscles on the shoulders, as well as the rhomboids, teres major and long head of the triceps brachii muscles. The bicep muscles in the upper arm are also recruited to a much lesser degree to assist during elbow flexion. In addition, many other muscles are recruited to stabilize the body in a position to perform the exercise correctly. These include the hamstrings, quads, glutes and calves in the legs, the rotator cuff muscles in the shoulders, as well as the erector spinae muscles in the back and the core muscles of the torso. Activating so many muscles for one exercise places a large demand on the body for energy requirement, so this exercise can be very effective at increasing the heart rate and making one breathless by the end of a set. The movement itself is a compound exercise because more than one joint is moving in the action against the resistance, this being extension and potential hyperextension of the shoulder joint and retraction of the shoulder blades, as well as flexion of the elbow joint. The nature of this exercise does place a load on the muscles of the lower back, so many people, especially beginners, will find that maintaining the position of the torso while moving the arms will be even more challenging than the lifting and lowering of the weight or resistance. There are lots of ways that this exercise can be performed, and some examples include a specific seated row machine in a gym where the weight can be selected, a plate-loaded seated row machine, using the Smith machine to perform a bent over row movement, a cable seated row machine, a traditional barbell bent over row, a dumbbell bent over row, a supported bent over row, which could also be doing one arm at a time, a seated row using resistance bands, or even a standing row using therapy bands. What you choose will be dependent on your exercise environment and what equipment is available to you, but also will be influenced by your health conditions, what your goal is, and the reason for choosing the exercise. There is a variation of the bent over row called a Pendlay row, which is used by performance athletes as it encourages an explosive movement to lift and lower the weight, allowing it to rest on the floor momentarily while being in a very low bent over position, which most average people like me will find difficult to do correctly. Therefore, as this channel isn't targeting athletes or the very fit gym gurus, I will not be including this version in the video. Furthermore, you could also do this movement with your body weight, such as on a TRX or doing an inverted row on a bar, but I will cover this in a future video as it is a separate exercise in itself because it moves the body around the fixed position of the hands rather than moving the hands around the fixed position of the body. This is similar to a bench press exercise and a push-up. Same movement pattern and muscle recruitment, but really two different exercises. I will split this technique into two parts, as although the exercise is fundamentally the same for both the seated row and bent over row, the setup will be slightly different. Let's start with the seated row, as it offers more support for the torso as your bottom is in contact with the seat, rather than only your feet being in contact with the floor as in the bent over row. Depending on what you are using, you should aim to have your feet a hip's width wide in front of you, with your legs slightly bent at the knees, and adopt an upright torso, maintaining a neutral spine. If you are using a heavier load and you have the option, using a stabilizing pad against the chest will help take the demand away from the lower back so you can place more focus on the movement. However, this is only likely to be in a gym setting on a specific machine, so if you are exercising at home with a resistance band, then you'll want to ensure that your torso remains rock solid still during the movement to activate many of the core muscles to stabilize your spine. Once you've adopted this position, you're ready to start the exercise, which we will come on to in a second. To set up for the bent over row, then again, you want your feet to be a hip's width wide on the floor, and ideally, it would be better to have the weight in your hands while in a standing position so that you can lower your torso to the start, rather than having to lift the weight up from the floor to get to the starting position. Once you have your feet set up, your hands should be about a shoulder's width wide, and you need to ensure that your spine is neutral. This basically means not having tilted your pelvis too far backwards or forwards. Then brace your core muscles as though someone was about to punch you in your stomach, and you tighten up your abdomen. Now you're ready to hip hinge to the starting position. Stick your bottom backwards as your torso comes forwards and down, so you only bend at the hip, keeping the spine neutral and allowing the knees to bend slightly. You will reach a point where you feel tension on the hamstrings on the back of the legs, so don't go beyond this point. Allow the shoulder blades to move apart so the shoulders are pulled forwards, and if you're using a barbell, it will be located somewhere around your knees depending on your mobility. Once you feel your position is solid, you're ready to start the exercise. To initiate the lift or concentric contraction, start by squeezing the shoulder blades down and back first. This effectively means lifting the weight slightly without bending the elbows, and I sometimes have had clients practice this movement alone to improve their mind-body connection before attempting the full lift. After retraction of the shoulder blades, drive your elbows back, pulling the hands either side of the waist. If you're using a bar, it will touch your belly button or come near to your bottom ribs. Your elbows will be about 45 degrees away from the body, but your hand position may vary this, which we will come on to later. If you can, you also want the elbows to go beyond the midline of your torso. This means hyperextending the shoulders so the elbows end up behind you. When you reach this end point, think about trying to force your elbows together, as this will add to the end contraction to really activate the muscles in the back. After a slight pause in this position, begin to lower the weight or commence the eccentric contraction by slowly allowing the arms to straighten, and at the end of this movement, let the shoulder blades protract, meaning they move apart, so you're ready to begin the next lift. Ideally, the direction of the movement should be opposite to the force. So if you're using a free weight, the movement should be up and down perpendicular to the floor to move it against the force of gravity. If using a resistance band, then the direction should be moving from the anchor point to your torso. If you're using a machine in a gym, then this will restrict the movement anyway, so it won't be something that you need to consider. Continue this movement in a controlled manner until you reach your desired number of reps, which will be dependent on your goal and intensity. Throughout the set, the torso should remain still to maintain a neutral spine and an isometric contraction of the muscles on the back of the legs, bottom and lower back. Right, let's now point out some of the common mistakes that are made during this exercise. The most common one is not having a neutral spine or being able to maintain spinal stability during the exercise. Lots of muscles are working isometrically to hold you in the right position, but they may fatigue before the muscles being used to lift and lower the resistance do, which is likely to round off your lower back. It may be that you've tried to get your torso too low before starting, or you kept your legs straight at the knees and your hamstrings tightened and pulled the pelvis backwards, rounding off your lower back. Either way, this puts your spine in a dangerous position under load, so it's absolutely crucial that your technique and spinal position remains solid throughout the entire set of repetitions. The next mistake is jerking at the pull, which causes a movement of the torso. This is normally due to either poor control of the core muscles or trying to pull against too much load, therefore inducing additional muscles to activate dynamically to help with the movement. Therefore, reduce the weight or slow the movement down so it becomes a smooth action to both lift and lower the weight. The next one is trying to bring the hands too high as though you were bringing them up towards your shoulders, allowing the elbows to flare out wider. This places excessive stress on the shoulders, which over time can lead to a rotator cuff injury. Although there are variations where your elbows can be a bit further away from the midline to activate the muscles on the upper back more, your hand position will be wider to allow for this, and your hands will still be in line with the chest. However, to play it safe, especially if you have shoulder issues, keep the hands lower towards your waist as you pull them in towards you. Being too upright for the bent over row or leaning back too far in the seated row variation will change the nature of the exercise, shifting more tension to the muscles on the upper back, but at the same time placing more stress on the shoulder joint. Ideally, the angle of your body should be leaning at least 45 degrees forwards and maybe as much as 75 degrees if your hamstring flexibility allows. But if you find that you can't even get to 45 degrees, then it's probably better to conduct the exercise in a supportive variation, which we will come on to later, that will take the flexibility component out of the equation. Be careful not to shrug the shoulders or push them forwards near the end of the lifting phase. This increases the level of internal rotation in the shoulders under load, again placing unwanted stress on the shoulder joint. Therefore, ensure that the shoulder blades remain depressed and retracted before and during the lifting and lowering phase. The final mistake is likely to be as the weight is being lowered, and that is rounding the thoracic spine in the upper back. Yes, allow your shoulder blades to be moved apart at the end of the repetition before retracting them again, but don't allow your spine to be pulled forwards. To reduce the likelihood of this happening, keep your head and chest up to fix your spine in the correct alignment throughout. This will also help you to maintain a good position of the lumbar spine in the lower back too. With the number of variations available with this exercise to assist the movement, this exercise is considered a very low risk for most health conditions and can be performed by most people. However, there are some considerations that may be required for some populations. Firstly, and probably most obviously, if you are suffering with low back pain as a result of a herniated intervertebral disc, or you have other underlying spinal problems, then this exercise may not be suitable with a heavy load. You will need to make adaptations, such as a support for the torso, or being conservative with the weight or resistance, and being especially strict with the technique. In some cases, if the movement causes pain or an increase in symptoms, you may need to eliminate the exercise and adopt a different exercise for this muscle group, but it will be in a very small number of cases. Secondly, as the movement is predominantly a shoulder extension movement that takes the shoulder joint into hyperextension at the end of range, anyone suffering with shoulder pain or related rotator cuff issues may also find this particularly more challenging. If the exercise induces additional pain symptoms, then try the movement with your elbows coming in much closer to the body to see if that helps. You could also try a different grip position so that the hands are supinated, meaning that the palms of the hands will be facing you, which will place more emphasis on the bicep muscles on the top of the arm, but may also take some of the pressure away from the shoulder joint and put it in a mechanically more efficient position. Thirdly, this exercise places a demand on the grip to hold the weight, handles or band to effectively perform the exercise. In cases where someone has carpal tunnel syndrome or other nerve impingement in the arm that affects their grip, or they are of an age where their grip strength is severely reduced, then the exercise may be more challenging to do safely. In these cases, opting for a therapy band where it can be wrapped around the hand may help. If this doesn't work, or for people with neurological impairments following a stroke or brain injury that affects one's gripping ability, then an aid such as that provided by Active Hands can be great at maintaining the grip to perform the exercise. I've used this aid with many of my stroke survivor clients in the past, and it's been invaluable at providing so many more options for exercising. So I'll leave a link in the description below for more details. Finally, people with certain health conditions that can cause excessive fatigue and breathlessness, such as COPD and heart failure, will probably not be able to do very many bent over rows due to the volume of muscles in the body being worked dynamically or isometrically. I would adapt the exercise for a supportive variation and even focus on one arm at a time, such as the single arm row, to reduce the intensity, allowing for this client group to manage a full set of repetitions. Now let's look at some variations and progressions that you can make to change or adapt the exercise. Firstly, let's start with the hand position or grip. You have three main options: overhand or pronated, where the palms of the hands face the thighs; neutral, where the palms of the hands face each other; and underhand or supinated, where the palms of the hands face you. For most of us, this will be a personal preference or dictated by what you are using and not really a factor for changing the exercise. However, an underhand grip with the palms facing upwards will place more emphasis on the biceps on the arms, taking some of the tension away from the main muscle groups in the back. Supporting your torso can help reduce the load on the posterior chain, such as the hamstrings and lower back muscles, and help place more focus on the muscles being worked in the movement. This could help people that find their lower back fatigues first during the bent over or seated row. If you're in a gym environment, then using a machine with this setup can be an option. If you're using a free weight, then you could use a bench on a very slight incline to lie face down on as a way of supporting your weight. You could also do this on a flat bench in the gym, but as a single arm row, keeping your torso parallel to the floor with one knee and hand on the bench for added support while the other arm is being exercised. But if you're at home, you can use an item of furniture as a support to rest a hand on while the other arm does the exercise. This can be really beneficial in targeting the muscles without compromising your lower back. Another version, but in a slightly less supportive method for the bent over row, is to stick your bottom against a wall before performing the lift that will provide some degree of support, similar to the seated row variation, but on a different body angle. Changing the angle of shoulder abduction during the lift, in other words how wide the elbows are, can vary the way in which your muscles are loaded. If you keep your elbows in close to the body during the lift, about 10 to 20 degrees away from the body, with the hands closer together if using a barbell, then the lat muscles on the side of the back will be doing most of the work. However, if your elbows are wider at around 70 to 80 degrees away from the body, with a wider grip on the barbell, then the muscles on the upper back will need to work more. You just need to ensure that the elbows don't flare out too wide, as this might aggravate the deeper muscles in the shoulders. In the technique chapter, we discussed the role of the shoulder blades retracting and protracting at the start and the end of the movement. However, there is a variation whereby one would depress and retract the shoulder blades, squeezing them down and back, and then hold that isometric contraction while performing the lifting and lowering against the resistance, maintaining the squeeze of the shoulder blades throughout the set. This can be effective for people that struggle with the mind-body connection, so that they can place more focus on the shoulder extension, this is pulling the elbows back, and elbow flexion, which is bending the elbows. This will limit the amount of movement during the exercise and could be used as a precursor to the full movement. If you're using resistance bands, you could try a crossover technique whereby the band is pulling the arm not only forwards away from the body, but across it on more of an angle. This can be beneficial in adding an increased range of motion for the shoulder blades as they are pulled apart more at the end of the repetition. You may also be able to do this with a cable machine in the gym if you can get the setup right. If you want an advanced version that can really help improve the activation of the lat muscles on the side of the back to keep the shoulder blades depressed, which can also add to the mind-body connection, then try doing the movement with an additional looped resistance band around the arms, pulling them forwards away from the body. Although the looped band will be on a different angle, so not adding to the resistance of the lift, the feeling of having to keep the weight or arms close to the body is exaggerated, thereby inducing a greater activation of the lat muscles. If you choose this progression, then just make sure that the level of resistance from the band isn't harder than the level of resistance from the lift, but the band should consistently remain under tension throughout the movement. To vary the movement, you could change the way that the exercise is performed by moving one arm at a time. This could be keeping one arm straight while the other lifts and lowers the weight, or for a harder variation, one arm holds the weight in while the other one lowers and then lifts the weight. Obviously, you can't do this with a barbell though. If you want to work the muscles more without increasing the resistance, then try pulsing or partial reps when the hands are close to the body. Finally, although you can increase the level of resistance to progress the exercise, you can make the exercise more challenging by changing the level of support. In the bent over row, this might be reducing the base of support by bringing the feet closer together, or standing on a wobble board or air cushion, or it could even be standing on one leg. For the seated row, you may change it to a standing row, reducing the support and using the same variations of the feet as the bent over row. You could also remove the bilateral balance, meaning doing one arm at a time, which will enhance further activation of the core muscles in the torso due to the imbalance. If you need the support for your back but still want to progress, try doing the single arm row but with the hand and knee on a gym ball to see how that works. Essentially, you can be as creative as you want, providing that the technique isn't compromised. I hope this provides you with a better understanding of the bent over or seated row exercise. Comment below if you want me to break down another popular exercise, but I hope the information in this video is useful to you. If so, please give it a like by clicking the thumbs up button below and consider subscribing if you haven't already. You can also check out the description below for ways that you can help support this channel. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay active and keep moving to feel better.